Hello, welcome, and we are back at the pad. This is basically the pad weeks on my channel, because last time we took a look at the 8050 disk drive, but now we're back to the pad, and it has an issue. There's a RAM expansion board in there to upgrade it to basic V4 and also to 32 kilobytes of RAM, because this is the 3016 pad, which has 16 kilobytes of built-in memory, and as you can see it now has 32 kilobytes of RAM using a modern 64K SRAM chip basically, and just using part of that. And yeah, it works kind of, but it crashes after a couple of minutes. For example, playing Petsky robots or Zorg or whatever you throw at it. And I put in here in the socket for the EROM, I put in a little EEPROM with a diag test basically, which does a memory test, and it passed 2 times. On the third pass we got a failure. This failure is totally random. It happens on different occasions. For some reason the RAM expansion is not reliable on this one. The regular RAM that's in here works flawlessly, so I'm not quite sure, but I also think the RAM expansion is a bit cheating, because it replaces the whole RAM on the mainboard and the whole logic driving that. And I thought it might be nicer to have genuine old RAM, and that's where this comes in here. And this, by the way, is the old EROM, which does, I don't know what, but it's in the E segment of the memory space. So that will go back in there once we've done the upgrade in the test. So this, and over here is more RAM, 16 4116 chips, or to be correct, these are actually 8116 chips, but they are the same. 16,000 times 1 bit. Gives us plenty of memory, basically 32 kilobytes to work with. There will be a few jumpers that we need to set and break or resolder depending on the configuration, but there are information in the technical data on the pad for this motherboard revision. So we will open up the pad, take out the main board. Also, we might have to clean it a little bit, because I cleaned it a couple of years back, but there's still so much dust inside of this machine because it was in a factory that the board now is dirty again. And yeah, then we'll try to make the upgrade. Hopefully the DRAM here will be working fine. There might be an issue with the power supply, with the linear regulators. We might do a mod to switch over to the switching regulators that I've also put into the disk drive to make the pad run cooler and have a more stable power supply basically, except for the minus 12 volts, because there is no off-the-shelf switching regulator made by the hobby community basically for the minus 12 volts, which shouldn't be that bad, because the minus 12 volts is only needed for the DRAM for the bias voltage, and that's only a few milliamps in total for the whole machine. So that regulator is under not much load, and the SRAM doesn't need that either. That's only 5 volts. So there might be an issue with the 5 volt rail, but I'm wondering if that's truly the case, because everything else runs rock solid. And maybe there's some other problems, but maybe I'm just gonna take out the RAM expansion completely. I will use the basic version 4 functionality, but we could burn basic 4 ROMs and put them in there instead of the original ROMs here. So let's see how that goes. But we could also just work with basic version 2, which is what this machine came with. We would lose the easier disk drive commands like directory and deload, which would be a shame in a way, but you could just use load $8 and so forth, like you do with the C64 actually. So I'm not sure that's actually that bad of a thing. So yeah, I would say we turn this off because this machine now has crashed. puts out the failure, and rip out the main board. So we finally got it out. Yeah, the board is still in an okay condition. Couple of things I noticed. Again, the dirt is obvious. The capacitors here have some kind of white stuff on it. I am thinking about just washing this with water and a little bit of soap, just like Mr. Adrian Black likes to do, because it's so full of, it's like chalk dust or something like that. I think that's from the factory where this was in use or stored. The edge connectors look a bit worse for the wear, which is, I think, a fault of the IEEE 488 connector or the SD2pad. Not sure if the SD2pad is really at fault, but I think the modern connectors are a bit strong, let's say. But so far it only exposed the copper, and the tin just wiped away basically. But I have to be a little bit careful. This is a board from 1979, so this is coming up on 45 years. Just using water and soap shouldn't do anything to this. Hopefully, I think there's nothing that is immediately averse to that. I don't have to drown the capacitor or anything, but to get everything clean. But perhaps we're not going to do that right now. What we can do right now is remove all the memory chips, which are the 4108s. We have to replace them. And then there are 2 jumper blocks here. And I also figured out there was a replacement for the 6520 socket, but that was not done by me, I think. You can see that over here. But this is probably only the socket, and yeah, seems to be working fine either way. But the jumper blocks here are interesting. Let me show you, because those need to be set correctly, and they are not your regular jumpers. They are called shunts. And let's zoom in. And they're basically little pads that you can break with a screwdriver. And we have to reattach them with a little bit of solder probably in the proper way. Also, I already figured out that this one seems to be set incorrectly, but the machine still works, at least according to what I can find out about this particular board revision, which is, I think, a rather common one, which actually is right here. It's the assembly number 320351. I think it's one of the later boards, but still one with the discrete video circuitry. So I think this here roughly is all the video chip stuff. There's no CRTC, it's all TTL logic, and which is quite interesting. I think these might be the video RAM chips. At least they look like some. They are MOS labeled 901453-02. Sounds a little bit like some SRAM, some small SRAM or something. In a ceramic gold package, very nice. Yeah. But that's, I think today maybe we start off with the minimal amount of work, which is remove all these chips and set the jumpers correctly here. So what you would like to do is to very carefully, it's very crunchy, lift the chips from both sides very, very carefully. And I'm gonna take a different tool because there's a little, I think, maybe tantalum capacitor here that I don't want to damage. I'm also not gonna recap the board right now because, again, board seems to be working fine, and I'm not a big fan of just replacing all the capacitors willy-nilly without any need. These chips look extremely crusty. they have oxidized a lot. And these are also very annoying single wipe sockets, I think. The more amazing it is that this whole machine just worked as it does. Well, so for probably having been in storage for 30 years, I guess, something like that, I will obviously keep the ICs here because they are still good. There was no fault, no RAM errors. But as you can see, working on the pad and similarly old machines is really something. You must be willing to spend a lot of time figuring things out and working with already very delicate and corroded things. And let us have a look what brand these RAM chips actually are. I haven't checked that, but they come out pretty nicely. So they are of the Mostec variety. They are MK4108N-30, so 300 nanosecond. Relatively slow, but I mean the machine is only 1 megahertz, so that should be fine. I think the parts that I now have are 200 nanoseconds, but faster shouldn't be a big issue here. That's mostly becoming an issue in later machines, but during this era I think 200 or 300 nanoseconds doesn't make a big difference. So all the sockets are free now, and I think I'm gonna put in some deoxit in there. Yeah, I think that should be good. You can also use an anti-static brush. There you go. And now we take this big old tube of new RAMs, new in the sense that they are new in stock. I already checked the date codes, they are from 1988. So here they are Fujitsu branded. Let's see if we can focus. Focus. Fujitsu MB8116E. Those should be just fine. And look how shiny the legs are. So notch is facing this way. And they go in quite easily with the additional deoxit. So I'm going to insert all those and then we'll have a look at the jumpers. So the deed is done. The new Fujitsu RAMs are installed and I must say they look so much nicer. They are super clean. They're really new old stock and yeah, I like that. There is a service manual, technical manual, whatever you call it, for the pad, especially for this assembly here. And here are the shunt configurations for the different variants. We basically are using item 108. Before, which are the 4108 RAMs, and the upper two are configurations for 16K and 32K with the item 33, which, if you look into the bill of materials, is the 4116, or in our case the 8116, which is compatible. And here you can see the shunt configuration that should be here, which should be open, close, open, close, close, open. However, you can see here that it is, let me see if I can pull it a little bit closer here, so you should be able to see. You can see it's not open, close, close, open, but it's open, close, open, open, close, open. So there is one open shunt for some reason. That seems to be there. Let's compare with the other jumper. It should be open, correct, close, 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 but it's again open. And then open, that's correct, close, open, close, open, close. So I have two shunts that are not correctly jumped. I wonder why that is the case. But I will go with the official documentation, because that's all I have. And cross my fingers that'll it'll work. Oh, sorry, you couldn't see what I was talking about. So let's move you over here a little bit. Sorry for the wobbly camera. So once more, the other shunt configuration should be open, close, close, close. And you can already see open, close, close, open. There's another shunt that is not correctly set. The rest again is correct. It's open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close, and open, close. That's fine. So I will use the shunt configuration as it is here, because I don't have anything else to go on, and yeah, assume that there is some reason for this, or it just works like that. I'm not sure. Either way, I will now try to change this here using some solder and maybe a screwdriver or this tool to break connections as necessary. So, very quickly, I made the shunts. I used this pick tool to break the connections that were there and shouldn't be there. And I used some solder blobs plus one little piece of a resistor leg to cross this one here. You have to be careful not to melt everything because it's really just very cheap plastic. So this is a very cheap component. You might also want to replace this with the dip switch. But I'm gonna stick with this 1970s technology, basically. This is a very cheap one. And yeah, let's do the other one. A quick before video. I hope I won't damage the board during the cleaning process, but I don't think so. hopefully. I did a little bit of burn-in running Petsky robots for 45 minutes, and it worked fine. It seems the machine has stabilized. It's running now with the stock basic 2 ROMs. I still can use the ROM expansion, but I don't think I want to do it right away. The RAM does seem to work perfectly fine. Petsky robots could be played for like 45 minutes or an hour or something without crashing, which wasn't possible before. There are other games that I would love to try, some Infocom adventures, but the interpreter has a few issues with basic version 2 and it doesn't load from the tape, the floppy drive obviously, that I have, the 8050. So I need to wait for some fixes on that front, but I think we can clean this board. I mean, look at it, there's, you can probably see that there's a lot of dust and grime here, and the sockets are all dirty. Let me see if I can put the lamp a little bit. It doesn't look too bad on video, I think, but believe me, it's dirty, it's very dirty. I already cleaned it like 2 or 3 years ago, but there was more dust coming out of the machine. And I also cleaned the case a bit more. And I think at some point I might have to take apart the CRT assembly at the top. But currently I'm not eager to do that yet. So yeah, that's that. Oldest chips on here are 1977 from the looks of it. 25th week, 13th week. But the whole thing seems to be from 1979. So what I'm going to do is rinse this with a lot of water and a little bit of dish soap to get all the grime off there. Then rinse again with water, and afterwards pour some IPA on it to displace the water, and also use an air dryer to gently blow out all the remaining water and leave it to dry overnight or a couple of days, and that should do it. Some people put these things in the dishwasher, but honestly I'm not very keen on doing that, especially with the large caps and all that stuff. So I think I'll leave it with water and some light dish soap, and that should do it. So I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna show you afterwards what it looks like, and then we can try if the whole thing survived this ordeal. So it is much better, but there is not a great shine to the PCB, and it feels like it's a little bit rough. I'm not sure if that was just the solder stop back in the day, or maybe that the dust from the factory was actually a bit corrosive. That could also be, maybe. And there are a couple of ICs with slightly corroded pins, even name brands like Texas Instruments, but most of them are fine. Here's another one. So yeah, I mean, as long as it works, I'm not overly worried. I'm gonna leave this to dry for like a day at least, and then redo deoxit on all the sockets, just to make sure that there's no water left and that there's a good protection on the socket pins basically. And then we'll put it back in the pad case, and hopefully it still works, and will continue to work for a long time. So everything is set up. We have the pad running here with the ROM expansion, but the RAM expansion that we just installed, because that is a stable configuration, because we need basic version 4 for playing the Infocom adventures. We're using the interpreter made by BitShifter. It's a very space efficient thing. It can utilize all the RAM that is there, and it can also use a RAM disk for storing parts of the story file. I am wondering if it would be possible to insert like a static RAM into one of the 2 empty RAM ROM slots. to get more RAM basically. That's maybe for a future thing, but right now we can work with this. The 8050 is here with my slightly misaligned drive 0, so we might get some read errors. I loaded the interpreter from drive 1, which works fine, and the story file seemed to have loaded just fine from drive 0, but there's always the possibility that it won't work. There's a lot of disk access because there is very little that can fit into the 30K of RAM. The C64 and especially the Plus 4 has much more frame memory, which is good. And for those you get interpreters like Osmo or the original Infocom interpreters. So Infocom itself never ported this thing to the pad. And we're playing here Stationfall just as an example, but things like Hibernated One by Stefan Vogt also work. I just tried it out, but it's a bit slower because it uses more advanced features of the Z Machine engine. But as you can see, it's very much possible to play the game. There's a lot of loading happening, and as you can see, there's errors, read errors happening, so I definitely need to adjust drive 0. The interpreter is hardwired to use drive 0, so sadly I can't put it to use drive 1. I could swap the mechanisms around, but yeah, as I said, this needs more adjustment. But yeah, it works. You can enter command like so, and it will immediately fetch the relevant data from the story file. So every command is super slow, but it works, and that is pretty impressive. I think back in 1977, people would have lost their minds over this. This is a game from 1987, so 10 years later. Yeah, I think that's pretty neat. It might be that I now got a read error that hung the game. Oh no, it definitely works, and it takes ages to respond with totally ordinary looking slot. So yeah. While not super well working, I would say it is technically working. Yeah, but there are other games, obviously, that we can play. Let's have a look at that. Okay, here's Petsky Robots. This game actually is able to load from drive 1, so there's no issue there. But you have to make sure that there's something drive 0 as well, but it doesn't matter which disk it is. It has sound support as well, so you can hear the beeper. I attached a Bluetooth speaker with a line input, and it supports the SNES pad as well. I think there is no in-game music, but some sound effects. And this game runs especially well from the 8050 and using the 32K RAM expansion. It also runs with basic version 2 even, so technically no need for the V4 basic ROMs, but I'm using them here, so it has an auto detection to switch to the different kernel routines basically. And yeah, as you can see, it runs really, really well. And you can play it just like on the C64. And if you don't know the game, it's actually pretty fun. It's kind of a survival game where you have to defeat all the robots that are running around. And once you've defeated them all, there's a teleporter, like in level exit, that you can trigger to end the current level. And yeah, it's a very nice game by the 8-bit guy that you probably know. And I think it's his best game so far. And it has been ported to like a ton of different platforms, and it originated on the pad. So it's very nice to be able to play it here, and even on a floppy disk drive that belongs to the pad. So yeah, totally playable and a lot of fun, I think. The maps are great, and there's some nice puzzles to think about how to defeat all the robots in there. So yeah, a very, very, very excellent game for such an old machine. So that does work, but we have one or two more things that I can show you. one more thing is a demo, an actual demo for the pad called Back to Pad, and it doesn't use any graphics because the pad doesn't have graphics. It only uses the PADSCII characters that you've already seen in PADSCII robots and that you know from the C64, but they originated on the pad, obviously, that's why it's called PADSCII. And yeah, let's have a look, and it also has a soundtrack, obviously. And there's a second demo that came out last year, made by Genesis Project, and it's called A Bright Shining Star. It also runs on 32 kilobyte pads, as we have right now, but also notice that there's no V4 here anymore, because it only runs on the older pad machines without the CRTC controller, which ours doesn't have, but I have the ROM expansion, which lets me switch between version 4 and version 2 basic. Version 4 needed for the Infocom interpreter, but version 2 needed for some other things like this demo. The reason being that the kernel, basically the operating system, not even the basic, has different addresses for different system calls, so people hard code against that. Games like Petsky Robots use a table, I guess, for detecting different versions of BASIC and then adjusting their system calls depending on the BASIC version. This here doesn't do that, so I needed to switch back to the version 2 BASIC, which is a good thing that I still have the ROM switcher basically in there, being able to switch between 2 BASIC versions, which is extremely nice. So yeah, let's start this demo and see what it can do. And the important thing here is, as I said, it's only for the old 2000 series machines, which the 3000 series is based upon. And this demo introduces an actual graphics mode for the pad, which normally can't do graphics, just Petsky. But they managed to create actual graphics. But yeah, let's have a look and see what it does. As you can see, the demo has no sound. I think there's not enough CPU time for that, due to the fact that they probably are doing some kind of very clever timing here. So yeah, I'll just continue to talk a little bit over this. So many of the parts that you see here do use the regular Petsky characters. I think here this is all Petsky, just very clever combinations. But here again is the very first bit of a new mode basically for the non-CRTC pads. And as you can see, the sine wave here has a much higher resolution than is possible with the stock Petsky characters that you've seen before in the low res mode. So that's already pretty impressive indeed. However, even more impressive is this here. This is an actual graphics mode, so to speak. I don't know if they can display it full screen, but here at least they used a couple of columns to display this astronaut and the background with the asteroid or clouds or whatever that is. And as you can see, that is definitely not possible with regular Petsky characters. So yeah, very impressive stuff indeed. So that's about it for today. We have the pad running perfectly fine, I would say, with Basic 4, with 30k of RAM. It doesn't crash. Yeah, the Infocom games and other Z Machine games like Hibernated are working, but they are obviously not that much fun if there's so much load times. So probably other machines are better suited for playing. But I will try to investigate if there's a possibility to have a RAM expansion that gives a few kilobytes more that can be used as a cache for this. That would be interesting. Petsky Robots is really well designed for the pad. It loads only very rarely when you switch to a new map. It is really made for the pad, so I can definitely recommend that. There's also a couple of other newly made games, mostly smaller. I think there's a Pac-Man clone and some other stuff that you should definitely check out. The pad scene is definitely still active. Not as much as the C64 or other 8-bit machines, obviously, because these things are old, relatively rare by now, and require an insane amount of work sometimes. And they can be a bit intimidating with their heavy metal chassis and weight of, I don't know, 10-15 kilograms per unit. The floppy disk drives are even worse with their mechanisms. As you saw, I need to tweak drive 0 for sure. So yeah, it's definitely a much harder machine to start off with than, for example, the C64, especially if you want to have all original hardware. Yeah, but that's it. Please leave a comment if you have had any contact with a pet, maybe back in school, like 40 years ago or something like that. Or if you own one, then please share your story. and otherwise just leave a comment, share, like and subscribe, all that stuff. All the useful links are in the video description. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, bye!